Hey guys, it's Danconia and welcome back to the Overwatch Contenders Roundup 2020. So once again we have a lot to get through. In the last Contenders Roundup we covered all of the trials that we could, although there were some trials that didn't take place in time for that video, mainly China and Korean contenders, so we will go through that as well at the end of this video. But first of all, we're going to go through the main contenders tournaments that we couldn't go through in the last one. So in the last one we went through Pacific and Australia. This one we're going to go through South America, North America, Europe, and then we're going to cover the two trials that we didn't cover in the last video. We are going to start off in South America then. And joining Dignity, Los Super Amigos, War Pigs and Petitos, we had And They Say, Horus Gaming, Up Gaming, Betrayed, Awakening, Black Ronin, Capybara Esports and Las Salamandras from the trials in South America that we covered in the last Contenders Roundup. And this is going to be really interesting because this is honestly something we haven't seen before. So, it's starting off in the round of 12. If you're wondering why it's called the round of 12, it's because there's 8 teams that compete in it and then there's 4 other teams that come into the quarterfinals. So it's where all 12 teams are competing technically, even though the other 4 haven't come in yet. So that's why it's called the round of 12, although I will call it the first round. We see Betrayed taking on Capybara Esports. This is a 3-1 win for Capybara, with them moving on to the quarterfinals. Betrayed will be dropping out of this Contenders main tournament here and dropping back down to trials for week 2. But they will pick up some points, because everyone picks up points if they reach the final Contenders tournament for the week. Then we had And They Say taking on Las Salamandras, and They Say will get a 3-0 win here. Remember, And They Say ripped through Trials and Open Division to get to this point, so they are a very good looking team right now. Up Gaming would take on Awakening. This would be a very close 3-2 win for Up Gaming. Up Gaming would move through to the quarterfinals. And Horus Gaming would take on Black Ronin. This would be a 3-1 win for Horus Gaming, and they would move on to the quarterfinals then. Now all of the teams that came through the seeding tournament come into this. So we had War Pigs taking on Capybara Esports. This was surprisingly close, but War Pigs would get that 3-2 win that they are expected to pick up. Then we see Petitos taking And They Say, and this would be the first casualty of the teams coming out of the seeding tournament, with And They Say getting a narrow 3-2 victory over Petitos and moving on to the semi-finals. Then we saw Dignity taking on Up Gaming. No surprises here that Dignity seal a 3-0 win with them moving on to the semi-finals. Dignity, a very good team in South America. And then Los Super Amigos take on Horus Gaming, and this was another surprise with the other seeding team going out of it, Los Super Amigos, and they actually went out pretty heavily. This is a 3-0 win for Horus Gaming, and they would move on to the semi-finals. So, in the semi-finals, we saw War Pigs taking on And They Say. And They Say would get a 3-1 win here. Can you see a trend with what And They Say are doing in this tournament right now? And then Dignity will be taking on Horus Gaming. Again, no surprises with the pedigree of Dignity. Dignity will be getting a 3-0 win over Horus Gaming, setting up a final for this week between And They Say and Dignity. And it would be a very one-sided 3-0 win for And They Say. And this is extraordinary, right? So Dignity are a very, very good team in South America. But And They Say, what they have done is nearly unheard of. I can't think of another team that has done this. They have swept Open Division, losing only a single map. They have swept Contenders Trials, not losing a map. And then they have swept the Contenders Tournament, losing only 3 maps during Contenders. So, out of the games they have played across Open Division, Contenders Trials Week 1 and Contenders Week 1, they have dropped 4 maps and won the entire thing. That is bonkers. And a piece of South American Contenders history. That is crazy. We are looking at a new South American powerhouse in And They Say right now. They will be staying in the main contenders tournament for week 2, and they are the team to beat. This is like crazy to think of a team going from just registering for Open Division and wiping the floor with the entire contenders for that region is just bonkers. Losing only 4 maps. 4 maps in 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9, 10, 11, 12, 13 games. They dropped 4 maps in 13 games. That is ridiculous. But moving on from South America, where that is just crazy. We're going to move to EU now then. And we've just got the main tournament to go through for EU. In EU, we saw 4 main seeding tournament teams, so this is British Hurricane, HSL Esports, Samsung Morning Stars and the Young and Beautiful. Alongside the Trials teams, this was Eternal Academy, Shoes Money Crew EU, Sheer Cold, Nariki Esports, Vox Nihili, Angry Titans, Notting Contenders, and Clockwork Vendetta. So, moving on to round 1, and we see Nariki Esports taking on Vox Nihili. This would be a 3-1 win for Nariki Esports, as you might expect. Nariki Esports, they've got a really good team, but they're just kind of getting together, and they're taking that spot from Team Giganti, who are no longer in this competition. So they're going to take some time to feel their way through the competition, but they do get a 3-1 win over Vox Nihili and move on to the quarterfinals. Eternal Academy get a 3-1 win over former contenders champions Angry Titans. Angry Titans are very much in a, should we say, a development stage right now. Angry Titans have really overturned their roster, losing a lot of that team that did win contenders back a couple of years ago. And Eternal Academy are looking very good, rejuvenated, after spending some time out of contenders. When they were first in contenders when Paris Eternal was first brought into the Overwatch League, they were very bad, and they dropped down all the way down to Trials when it was like the lowest point they could go. And this time they have turned it around, and they are looking like a really good team. Sheer Cold would take on Clockwork Vendetta. Sheer Cold looked really, really good in the Trials, and this shows here with Clockwork Vendetta falling 3-1 to Sheer Cold. Clockwork Vendetta, again, much the same as Angry Titans, very much in a transition period, with probably some surprising results for some people. Clockwork Vendetta are definitely off colour at the moment, and we will see what happens in the long run for them. And then we had Shoes Money Crew EU taking on Notting Contenders. Again, Shoes Money Crew EU looked very good during the Trials tournament. Notting Contenders coming in from Open Division. Shoes Money Crew get a 3-1 win here and move on to the quarterfinals, where these seeding tournament teams enter, and there's some surprising results here, can I tell you. Right, British Hurricane taking on Nariki Esports. This goes as planned with a 3-0 win for British Hurricane. British Hurricane have looked like the best team in the region right now, especially when you take into account the seeding tournament and when they took part in Breakable Barriers. They have really slapped this region around in recent months. So we would expect British Hurricane to come into this as the favourite for the tournament. Then we move on, and Young and Beautiful took on Eternal Academy. This is when things start to get turned on their head. Eternal Academy get a very, very efficient 3-0 win over Young and Beautiful here, dumping the seeding tournament out of this round. And Eternal Academy, again, I said, are looking very good right now, but it was the battle of the Academy teams up next in the semi-finals, which would be interesting. But first we had HSL Esports taking on Sheer Cold, and again, not a lot of people want to go up against this new Sheer Cold team right now. HSL Esports, obviously, holders of contenders. They are holders of contenders. They went to Gauntlet last year, and they got dumped out by Sheer Cold 3-2. Again, another seeding tournament bites the dust. A seeding tournament team bites the dust. And it's a real turn up for the books, but Sheer Cold have looked good. HSL Esports haven't looked good recently. And it showed here. And then we had some Morning Stars taking on Shoes Money Crew EU. Again, the seeding tournament team comes a cropper, losing 3-1 to Shoes Money Crew EU and being dumped out at the quarterfinal stage, where they enter the tournament. All of these teams are now going to be going down to Trials. So it's going to be interesting to see what they do in Trials, especially the likes of HSL and people like that who are, you know, expected to be good, but don't seem to be pulling their weight right now. Shoes Money Crew EU moving on with a 3-1 victory to the semi-finals then, where we will see British Hurricane take on the Paris Eternal Academy. The battle of the Academy teams, the only 2 Academy teams in Europe for obvious reasons, and this was a really interesting one. So the Eternal Academy took an early lead against the British Hurricane, taking the first map, and this one will go to and fro with British Hurricane drawing level and then getting in the Paris Eternal will get in the lead again, and then Hurricane will bring it back again. But eventually Hurricane seal out a 3-2 victory over the Eternal Academy. Definitely the team who has taken Hurricane the closest so far this year, so it's promising for the Eternal Academy. No one is going to have an easy time going up against the British Hurricane right now. So a very good performance for the Eternal Academy and a few mistakes just to iron out, and they will be one of the contenders, pardon the pun, for the title in EU right now. And then we had Sheer Cold taking on Shoes Money Crew EU, and this is where the great run of Sheer Cold would end, with Shoes Money Crew EU getting a 3-1 victory over Sheer Cold and moving on to the grand final. So, British Hurricane taking on Shoes Money Crew EU, and this was a hell of a match. Shoes Money Crew EU took a 2-0 lead after British Hurricane had to forfeit the first map, because I believe they had connection issues with Danid. Danid then had to run from his house to his mother's house, set up his his PC again, come back into the match, they turned it around and won 3-2. What a story. And you will only get this in Contenders. Going from his normal house to his mother's house with his setup in 15 minutes, setting it all up, coming back into the match, and they turn it around and win Contenders week 1 in Europe. That's just bonkers. I love stories like that, and hey, it's something to just keep quoting from then on. You know, I'm the guy who ran to my mother's house in 15 minutes with my PC set up with me to take part in a Contenders final. That's just crazy. But those are your results for EU for week 1. Again, I'm not going to go for the points right now because there's a lot to get through, but we will cover them when I get the chance to. Moving on to NA then, and we saw some interesting stuff in NA as well. So in the NA tournament, we had Team Envy, Second Wind, Sky Foxes, Atlanta Academy, Third Impact, Karasuno, Maryville Saints, Revival, Triumph, Noble, Montreal Rebellion, and Square 1. So in round 1, we saw Revival taking on Triumph. This is a heck of a grudge match right now in this region between Revival and Triumph. And it's great to see it, you know, go one way and then the other. We've seen it in Breakable Barriers, we've also seen it in Trials, and now we're seeing it here once again. But Revival get the win this time, 3-2 again, a really close game, and some really interesting comps coming out from both teams. So if you want to go and watch a game, this one was streamed, and I recommend you watch it on the Contenders YouTube channel. But moving on, we saw Maryville Saints taking on Montreal Rebellion. The Toronto Academy, that is Montreal Rebellion, would come a cropper here against the Maryville Saints with a 3-0 victory for the Saints, and they would move on to the quarterfinals. Watch out for the Saints, because they're causing some waves in the NA right now. Third Impact would take on Square 1. This was a surprising result. Third Impact were quietly fancied to do quite well, and they lose 3-2 to Square 1 here. Square 1 came in as the bottom seed, so this was a surprise and an upset in itself. Square 1 moving on to the quarterfinals, and then Karasuno would take on Noble. Again, this was always going to be a fairly close game, but Karasuno came into this as the number 1 or the number 2 seed from Trials, and it showed here with Karasuno getting a 3-0 win over Noble and moving on to the quarterfinals. So, the seeding tournament teams come in at this stage, and we see Team Envy take on Revival. It really couldn't be much of a tougher test for Revival at this stage. They do put up a fight, but a 3-1 win for Team Envy will see Revival drop out of Contenders at that point. They will have to take part in Trials again next week, but they have the potential to go further in this competition. They showed some really good stuff this week, and it looks promising for the future. Team Envy moving on as you would expect to the semi-finals. Then we had Atlanta Academy taking on Maryville Saints, and this is when things get super weird. Atlanta Academy gets slapped across the face by Maryville Saints with a 3-0 win for the Saints, with them moving on to the semi-finals, dumping Atlanta Academy to Trials, which is extraordinary. And I mean, Atlanta Academy aren't the team they were, don't get me wrong. A lot of their players got promoted to the Overwatch League after their stunning performance last year, but it's still surprising to see a team that was so good get slapped by a team that was... They were good in Trials, right? But they weren't expected to be what they are doing right now. Maryville Saints are a very big surprise package in NA Contenders, and a team to watch out for with a lot of young players coming from that university team. So, then we see Sky Foxes taking on Square 1. Again, you want another surprise result? This is another one. Sky Foxes, heavily fancied because they were doing really well in Breakable Barriers. They came into the seeding tournament and did well there as well to get that seeding for the main Contenders tournament. But then they come into this Contenders tournament and get slapped by the bottom seed Square 1. So, Sky Foxes are going down to Trials next week. And Square 1 are going on to the semi-finals, and they have qualified for Contenders, the main tournament, for week 2. So congratulations to Square 1. And yeah, there's not much to say about that. Sky Foxes, that's very surprising, considering the roster they've got and considering the quality they've got. Square 1, a team to watch out for once again. And then we had Second Wind taking on Karasuno. Second Wind came into this as number 2 seed, and it showed here with Second Wind getting a 3-1 victory over Karasuno. Karasuno, though, nothing to be ashamed of, coming in from Trials and obviously Open Division before that. Karasuno have looked good, and I expect them to be fighting in Contenders for the main tournament next week as well. And then we saw in the semi-finals, Team Envy taking on Maryville Saints. Now, oh boy, this was a close game. Maryville Saints did not half give Team Envy a scare here. Remember, this is the Team Envy with a lot of pedigree on it. Maryville Saints actually took a 2-0 lead. Envy needed a rallying cry at halftime to get this result, and that they do. 3 map wins would see them get a 3-2 victory over the Maryville Saints. Maryville Saints will be competing in contenders for week 2. They won't have to go through trials, and very, very much deserved, because they have really put on a show here, and they have caused some very, very surprising results. The Maryville Saints are a massive, massive surprise package from this week, and I can't wait to see what they do in the future. But Team Envy would move on to the final, but who would they be facing? Would it be Square One or Second Wind? Square One, you can beat Sky Foxes, but Second Wind was a whole different hurdle. Second Wind would get a 3-0 victory over Square One and move on to the final. So, Team Envy taking on Second Wind. Team Envy probably came into this as favourites, but it was an incredibly close match. Second Wind would take the victory over Team Envy though, 3-2, and Second Wind will be the winners of Contenders NA 2020 Week 1, Season 1, whatever, it's got a very long name. So, this video's getting long, isn't it? We've got some trials to look at. Right, I'm going to go over China a minute, because China, it's very confusing, doesn't seem to be following the same bracket as everything else. What I can tell you is coming from trials to compete in the main Contenders tournament for China in this Week 1, which will be starting on the 17th, it is Cosmos Veritas Gaming, First Fabulous Fighter, Like This Player, and the one winner. They have come up from trials and they will be competing with Like Gaming, Flag Gaming, Bilibili Gaming, and Team CC for a chance at winning Contenders Season 1, Week 1 of 2020, and it'll be interesting to see what happens. They're not following the same bracket as everyone else. There seems to be a grouping stage for trials, and I'm not quite sure how it's working right now, so I don't want to talk about it and not basically know what I'm on about. I'm just going to give you the information that I know, and that's what I know from people being promoted from trials right now in China. But moving on to Korea though, when things get much, much easier to talk about. So, in Korea we had Meta Anthena, World Game Star Phoenix, GC Busan Wave, T1, which used to be the Philadelphia University, by the way, the Fusion University, Oza Gaming, Team BM, Lucky Future, Looking for Sponsor, Balance Flame, Batlica, Top Honor, and Bravos Gaming. So, moving into the bracket then, and in round 1 we saw Looking for Sponsor taking on Batlica. This would be a 3-0 win for Batlica, and this means they will be moving on to the quarterfinals. OZ Gaming will be taking on Bravos Gaming. This would be a 3-0 win for OZ Gaming, and they will be moving on to the quarterfinals. Lucky Future would take on Balance Flame. This would be a 3-0 win for Lucky Future. Lucky Future have got a very stacked roster, and I expect them to do well in the future. Team BM taking on Top Honor. This will be a 3-1 win for Team BM, and they will be moving on to the quarterfinals. In the quarterfinals then, we see the seeding tournament teams come in. We started off with Meta Anthena taking on Batlica, and this will be a 3-1 win for Meta Anthena, as you would expect from a seeding tournament team, and they would move on to the semi-finals. T1 would take on OZ Gaming. This would be a 3-0 win for T1, and they would move on to the semi-finals. WGS, or World Game Star Phoenix, will be taking on Lucky Future. I actually expected this to be close, but it wasn't. It was a 3-0 win for WGS Phoenix. Lucky Future will be moving on to Contenders, the main tournament, however. But Lucky Future have got a stacked roster. Need I remind you that they have Munchkin, Dako, and Guido, and Nurse. So Lucky Future have got a very interesting roster, and it'll be interesting to see what they do in the future. But Phoenix will be moving on to the semi-finals, and it will be GC Busan Wave taking on Team BM, and this will be a 3-1 win for Team BM, the team coming from the Open Division for Korea, and GC Busan Wave will be dropping out at this stage. Another one of our seeding tournament teams not doing as expected, but they will get a place in Contenders for Week 1. In the semi-finals, we saw Meta Anthena taking on T1. This was a really close match, but Meta Anthena will be taking a 3-2 win over T1. This is about where T1 are at right now. They're kind of trying to get to the upper echelons, but they're not quite there. We saw that with Fusion University before it was rebranded. And then WGS Phoenix will be taking on Team BN. This would be a really good 3-1 win for Team BM. Considering WGS Phoenix knocked out Lucky Future, I think this is a really, really good win for Team BM, considering they came from Open Division. And then we saw Meta Anthena take on Team BM in the final. This would be a 3-1 win for Team BM. Team BM would win Contenders Trials Korea Season 1, Week 1, 2020, all the way from Open Division. And they weren't even the top seed from the Open Division either. So that is really, really good work from Team BM. And they will be featuring in Contenders Week 1 for Korea, which is starting on the 17th, just like China. It will feature, obviously, Jisoo Busang Wave, Lucky Future, Oza Gaming, Butlika, the World Star Gaming, T1, Metaranthena, Team BM, Element Mystic, Gen G, O2 Blast, and of course, who else but Runaway. So, that will be your Contenders Korea lineup for Week 1. I will get back with the results of them when they come in, alongside obviously trials for other regions and the main Contenders tournaments when they come around. I'm thinking of doing 2 Contenders roundups per week to try and keep on top of that, because if I was to do all of these results, trials and main tournaments in one video, well, you've seen how long this one is, and it would only be longer. But I'm going to leave it here for this one. So, thank you guys so much for watching this video. If you'd like to give it a like, subscribe if you're new, and I'll see you in the next video. See you then.